All right, for the very latest from Mexico, we can go across to our correspondent Ross Velton, who is at one of the polling stations in Mexico City. Ross, first of all, tell us, how's the voting been going in terms of the turnout? Has it been strong enough? And will that at all make any difference to what is going to be the likely outcome, which is a win for the Institutional Revolutionary Party and its candidate, Enrique Peña Nieto?
Yeah, hello there. How's it going? Well, as you said, I am standing outside a polling station, and well, it's raining now, but earlier in the morning there was a big line of people outside this station waiting to vote. And we went inside and spoke to one of the observers, and he said that they'd been waiting for 2 hours before the station opened. Sort of that tends to suggest there's a lot of interest in this election. Indeed, the newspapers this morning have been reporting that the electoral body organising the elections is hoping for a 60% turnout. Now, to answer the second part of your question, whether or not that will affect the result, probably not. I mean, Enrique Peña Nieto is so far ahead in the polls that most people think it would take something very, very dramatic to prevent him winning.
It's quite curious. I mean, what should have been the #1 issue dominating this election should have been the drug-related violence. As many as 50,000 people killed in that in the last few years in Mexico, and yet we haven't seen any of the main four candidates there addressing that issue head-on. Most notably, Mr. Peña Nieto, he's rarely ever mentioned going after the drug cartels, has he?
Yeah, well, it's a very good point, and you're right, it is mystifying why this massive issue, both here and abroad, hasn't really been discussed as much as many people thought it would have been and should have been. Now, some people think that's because the candidates are really not proposing anything that's much different to what's already, what the government are already doing. I mean, there have been slight differences in policy, but most of the candidates are still arguing for the same thing. I mean, they still want to continue fighting the cartels. The difference, if there has been any, is that the candidates are now talking more about reducing the violence rather than going for the big big men in the cartels and trying to take them out and dismantle the cartels. It also has to be mentioned that because Peña Nieto is so far ahead, he doesn't really need to have to attack the government on its policies. For example, how it's dealing with the security situation. So that also is one reason why this massive issue hasn't really been discussed that much during the election campaign.
And Ross, very quickly, the Institutional Revolutionary Party, the PRI, ruled Mexico for much of the 20th century, and much of it in a very autocratic manner. Aren't people there worried about the past and whether Mr. Peña Nieto, if he eventually becomes president, might bring back some of that?
Well, I think they are to a point, but the thing about Peña Nieto is that although he's got very, very firm links to the traditional part of the Institutional Revolutionary Party, he's presenting himself as a new candidate, a fresh face, who's going to change the country, who's going to reform. So really, he's trying to distance himself in a way to the reputation that the Institutional Revolutionary Party has for corruption and the other things you mentioned. Yeah, Peña Nieto is really presenting himself as a new face on an old party.